The hallway had not heard footsteps in years. Dust rested across the floor like a quiet snowfall that never melted. At the far end stood a single wooden door, closed, but not forgotten. Every evening, just before the sun slipped behind the low rooftops, a shadow formed outside that door. It stretched slowly across the peeling paint, long and patient, as if waiting for someone who was late. No one in the building could explain it. Most people tried not to look. The apartment complex sat on the edge of a small American town where the highway curved away toward open land and silent gas stations. The kind of place where neighbors waved without knowing each other's stories. Where time felt softer, slower, almost unfinished. Inside Unit 3B lived a man named Caldervale. Not a common name, and not a man many people truly knew. Calder worked nights repairing vending machines across 3 counties. He drove an aging service van that rattled like loose coins in a pocket. His routes carried him through hospitals, bus depots, and empty school corridors long after everyone had gone home. He told himself he liked the quiet. Or maybe he simply no longer remembered what noise felt like. During the day, he slept behind drawn curtains. In the evenings, he drank coffee that cooled before the first sip. His life moved in careful circles, small and contained. No family photos rested on the walls. No music drifted through the rooms. No messages waited on his phone. Only the low hum of the refrigerator, sounding like a distant memory that refused to fade. But Calder was not completely alone in that building. Across the hall, Unit 3A had remained empty for nearly 8 years. The door stayed locked, the mailbox untouched, the windows dark even in summer light. Management had tried to rent it again and again. Every attempt ended the same way. Tenants spoke of strange sounds. Soft knocking. Footsteps that stopped when followed. A feeling of being watched from the hallway without seeing anyone there. Eventually, the landlord stopped trying. The door remained closed, and time gathered around it like dust no one wanted to disturb. Calder never believed stories like that. Machines failed for real reasons. Lights flickered because wires aged. Sounds traveled through walls and old buildings. Everything had an explanation. Everything made sense if you looked long enough. At least that was what he believed until the first night he noticed the shadow. He returned from work just after midnight, tired in the way sleep could not repair. The hallway light buzzed faintly above him. As he passed the empty unit, something inside him slowed. Not a sound, not a movement, just the quiet feeling that the space beside him was not empty. He turned slightly, and there it was, a thin shadow touching the bottom of the closed door, as if someone stood on the other side, close enough to breathe against the wood. Calder waited. The shadow did not move. He told himself it was the hallway light behind him, simple angles, simple physics. Still, he stood there longer than necessary, listening. Nothing answered. Finally, he unlocked his own door and stepped inside. But that night, sleep did not come easily. The next evening, the shadow appeared again. Same place, same stillness, same silent patience. Calder tested it without thinking. He stepped closer. The shadow remained. He moved his hand between the light and the door. No change, no shift, no explanation. For the first time in years, something in his careful world did not make sense. Days passed, then weeks. The shadow never missed an evening. Always just before sunset. Always gone by morning. Calder began timing it without meaning to. 5:43, 5:47, 5:50. Winter approached and daylight faded earlier. The shadow adjusted with it, faithful as a clock no one wound. He told no one, because there was no one to tell, until the letter arrived. It waited on the floor inside his apartment, slipped through the mail slot sometime during the day. No return address, no stamp, only his name written in careful, uneven handwriting. Caldervale. He stared at it for a long, quiet moment before picking it up. The paper felt older than it should, soft at the edges as if carried for a long time. Inside waited a single sentence. You promised you would come back. No signature, no date, nothing more. Calder read it again and again, each time hoping memory would answer. Something tried to rise inside his mind, faint as a sound heard underwater, but it slipped away before forming into anything clear. He searched the building's security footage through an outdated system that rarely worked correctly. No one had entered. No one had left. Yet the letter rested in his hand, real and undeniable. That evening, the shadow outside Unit 3A looked darker than before. Thicker somehow. Less like a trick of light. More like presence. Calder stood in the hallway longer than he ever had. His heartbeat slower, heavier, as if time itself had thickened. A strange thought settled quietly into his mind. What if the shadow was not waiting for someone inside the empty room? What if it was waiting for him? The idea felt impossible, yet it refused to leave. That night, he did something he had avoided for 8 years. He searched his past. Old emails, storage boxes, receipts from places he barely remembered visiting, fragments of a life that felt distant, almost borrowed. Near the bottom of a worn cardboard box, he found a photograph, faded at the corners, touched by warm summer light. 2 figures stood outside this same apartment building. One was Calder, younger, smiling in a way he no longer recognized. Beside him stood someone whose face had been scratched away. Not torn, not faded. Scratched deliberately until nothing remained. On the back of the photograph, 3 words had been written. "Don't forget me." The room felt unsteady around him, like balance had shifted somewhere deep inside his chest. He did not remember taking the picture, did not remember the person beside him, did not remember anything that explained the letter or the shadow or the waiting. Outside, the sun lowered slowly toward the horizon. Light stretched across the quiet hallway. And patiently as always, the shadow returned to the door of Unit 3A. Calder stepped into the hallway before he could change his mind. Each footstep sounded louder than it should inside the silence. The air felt colder near the empty apartment. He stopped inches from the door, close enough to see faint scratches circling the lock. Marks he was certain had not been there before. Or maybe marks he had never allowed himself to notice. The shadow touched the front of his shoes. Still unmoving. Still waiting. A question formed in his chest, heavy and quiet. Who had written the letter? Who had been erased from the photograph? Why did the empty room feel like it remembered him? Calder slowly raised his hand toward the doorknob. Before his fingers could touch the metal, a sound came from inside Unit 3A. Soft. Slow. A single knock. His breath stopped between moments. Another knock followed, gentle, almost careful. Like someone who had waited a very long time and feared being ignored again. The hallway light flickered once, then steadied. Calder's hand hovered in the air, close to the door, close to an answer he was not sure he wanted. Because somewhere deep in a memory he could not reach, a quiet certainty whispered. Someone had once lived in that room. Someone who never came home. And somehow, for reasons he did not yet understand, Calder Vale had been the last person to see them alive. The knock came a third time. And this time, it sounded like a question waiting on the other side of the forgotten door. Calder did not open the door that night. His hand remained in the air for a long moment. Then slowly he lowered it, as if touching the handle might break something fragile inside his memory. The hallway stayed silent after the third knock. No movement, no voice, only the faint hum of electricity behind the walls. He stepped back. One step, then another. The shadow did not follow. It stayed pressed against the bottom of the door like a quiet promise. Calder returned to his apartment and closed the door gently behind him. He locked it without thinking, then checked the lock again, as if the small sound of metal could protect him from questions he was not ready to face. Sleep did not come. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling while the night moved slowly around him. Every small sound felt louder than usual. Pipes shifting, wind brushing the windows, the distant passing of a truck on the highway. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, a memory tried to surface again. Not clear, not complete, just a feeling. Warm sunlight, laughter in the hallway, someone standing close beside him. Then nothing. Morning arrived without rest. Calder sat at the kitchen table holding the photograph he had found in the box. He studied the empty space where a face had once been. The scratches were deep and uneven, done with force, done with intention. He tried to imagine who would erase themselves from a memory, or who would erase someone else. The 3 words on the back felt heavier in daylight. Don't forget me. But he already had, and that frightened him more than the shadow. That afternoon, Calder called the building manager for the first time in years. Her name was Aloan Pike, a quiet woman with careful eyes who spoke as if every word needed permission before leaving her mouth. She answered on the third ring. Calder asked a simple question. Who lived in Unit 3A before it became empty? Silence filled the line. Not confusion, not surprise, something closer to hesitation. Eloan finally said the records were old. Some files missing. She did not remember clearly. Her voice sounded distant, as if she were standing in a different room from the phone. Calder thanked her and ended the call. But the silence she left behind felt louder than any answer. That evening he returned from work earlier than usual. The sky still held color. Soft orange fading into gray. He stood at the far end of the hallway, watching Unit 3A. Waiting. 5:43. Nothing. 5:47. Still nothing. For a brief moment, he wondered if the shadow had disappeared. If the strange pattern had ended as quietly as it began. Then at 5:50 the darkness formed again. Slow. Patient. Unavoidable. Calder felt something shift inside his chest. Not fear exactly. Something deeper. Recognition trying to wake up. This time he walked closer without stopping. Each step steady. Deliberate. He stopped in front of the door and spoke quietly. Not sure why. Not sure to whom. Hello? The words sounded unfamiliar in the empty hallway. Like a language he had not used in years. No answer came. But the air felt different. Heavier. Listening. Calder swallowed and tried again. Who are you? The silence held for several long seconds. Then from the other side of the door came a sound softer than the knocks. Almost a breath. And a voice. Faint. Broken. Distant. You know. Calder's body went still. Every thought paused. Because the voice did not sound like a stranger. It sounded like something remembered through fog. Something once close. He stepped back suddenly. Heart moving too fast now. This was impossible. Doors did not speak. Empty rooms did not breathe. He turned and walked quickly to his apartment. Not running, but close. Inside, he pressed both hands against the kitchen counter, waiting for the world to feel normal again. It did not. Night came slowly. Calder did not turn on the lights. He sat in darkness, holding the photograph, trying to force memory to return. Hours passed. Near midnight, another sound reached him. Not from the hallway. From inside his own apartment. A soft metallic click. He looked toward the front door. Still closed. Still locked. The sound came again. Closer this time. From the bedroom. Calder stood slowly. Every movement careful. He walked down the short hallway toward the open bedroom door. The darkness inside felt thicker than the rest of the apartment. For a moment he could not move. Then he reached for the light switch. The room filled with pale yellow light. Nothing appeared out of place. Bed untouched. Closet closed. Window still latched. But on the floor near the bed lay something that had not been there before. A small key. Old brass. Worn smooth from years of use. Calder stared at it without breathing. He knew this key. Not from sight, but from feeling. Like a word on the edge of memory. He picked it up slowly. Cold metal against warm skin. The moment his fingers closed around it, a flash of memory broke through. Rain against windows. Someone crying. A promise spoken in a voice shaking with fear. I will come back for you. I swear. Calder gasped softly as the image vanished again, leaving only the echo of his own voice, saying words he did not remember choosing. The key trembled in his hand, because somewhere deep inside, he already knew what had opened. Morning could not come fast enough. As soon as the first gray light touched the sky, Calder stepped into the hallway. The building felt different in daylight. Smaller, harmless, almost ordinary. Unit 3A looked like nothing more than an old locked door. No shadow, no sound, no voice. For a moment, he wondered if the night had imagined everything. Then he looked down at the key in his palm. Real, heavy, waiting. Calder walked to the door across the hall. His heartbeat slow but steady now, like someone approaching a truth instead of running from it. He raised the key toward the lock. Stopped. Breathed in carefully, because opening the door would change something. He felt that with quiet certainty. Some doors once opened could never be closed again. The hallway remained still. Watching, Calder pushed the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. The metal turned with a soft sound that echoed louder than it should. A click. The first real sound from Unit 3A in 8 years. Calder rested his hand on the doorknob. eyes closed for a single second. Then he turned it slowly. The door opened only a few inches before stopping, as if something inside resisted the movement. Cold air slipped through the gap, carrying a faint scent of dust and something older. Something like forgotten time. Calder pushed a little harder. The door creaked open just enough for darkness to show itself. Not empty darkness, but depth, like a room holding its breath. He did not step inside. Not yet, because from somewhere deep within the apartment, beyond the reach of daylight, came a quiet sound. Not a knock this time. Not a voice. Something softer. A music box melody. Slow. Unsteady. Missing notes. The sound of something waiting far too long. Calder felt tears press suddenly behind his eyes without understanding why. A memory moved closer. Closer than before. A name almost spoken. A face almost seen. And a single terrifying question rising with it. If someone had been waiting inside that room for 8 years, how had they survived? Or worse, what if they had never left at all? Calder stood in the doorway between past and present, holding the key, listening to the broken melody drift through the dark. And for the first time he understood. Opening the door was not the beginning of the mystery. It was the moment just before the truth finally stepped into the light. Calder did not realize he was crying until a tear reached his jaw and fell into the quiet hallway. He wiped his face quickly as if someone might see, even though the building remained empty and still. The music box sound continued from inside Unit 3A. Soft, unsteady, like a memory trying to breathe. He pushed the door open a little more. The hinges complained in a slow, tired voice that had not been used in years. Dust filled the air, drifting through the thin line of daylight behind him. The room smelled closed off from time. Old wood, faint fabric, something forgotten but not gone. Calder stepped across the doorway. The temperature dropped immediately. Not cold like winter. Cold like a basement where sunlight never reached. He stood still, letting his eyes adjust. Shapes formed slowly out of shadow. A small living room. Furniture covered in pale sheets. A chair turned toward the window, as if someone had once been sitting there waiting. The music box melody came from deeper inside, somewhere beyond a narrow hallway leading to the bedroom. Each note sounded fragile, as though it might stop forever if he moved too fast. Calder took one careful step forward. The floor creaked beneath his weight. The sound felt too loud, too alive inside a place meant to stay silent. Nothing else moved. Nothing greeted him. But the feeling of not being alone returned stronger than before, pressing gently against his back. Watching, he swallowed and spoke into the dim air. I came back. The words surprised him. He had not planned to say them, yet they felt true in a way nothing else had for years. The melody did not stop, but something changed. A pause between notes. Like listening. Calder walked slowly through the living room. His fingers brushed the back of the covered chair. Dust lifted into the air like gray smoke. Another memory flickered at the edge of thought. Someone sitting in that chair, reading quietly, looking up to smile when he entered the room. The image vanished before he could hold it. He reached the narrow hallway. Darkness thickened ahead. The music box clearer now. Step by step, he moved forward. Heart steady but heavy, like walking toward a truth already known but never spoken. At the end of the hallway, the bedroom door stood half open. Warm light did not wait inside. Only shadow layered over more shadow. Yet the melody came from there. Gentle, patient, endless. Calder pushed the door wider. The bedroom appeared almost untouched by time. A bed neatly made. Curtains drawn. A small wooden dresser against the wall. And on top of the dresser, a music box slowly turning. Its painted surface showed tiny fading stars. The lid already open. The metal key inside rotating by itself. No wind. No hands. No reason. Still it played. Calder stepped closer, unable to breathe fully. Because another feeling had arrived. Stronger than fear. Stronger than confusion. Grief. Deep and sudden. Like a wound reopening after years of numb silence. He reached the dresser. His hand trembled above the music box, but did not touch. A whisper moved through the room, soft as fabric shifting. You came back. Calder closed his eyes. The voice was clearer now. Still distant. Still fragile. but familiar in a way that broke something open inside his chest. "I tried to remember you," he said quietly. "I tried." Silence followed. Not empty. Listening. When he opened his eyes, the room looked the same. Yet the air felt closer, full of presence. He forced himself to look around more carefully, searching for anything real, anything that could explain the voice. That was when he noticed the second pillow on the bed, pressed slightly inward, as if someone invisible rested there. Calder's breath caught. Another memory surged forward stronger than before. Rain falling hard against glass. A storm warning on the radio. Someone afraid to sleep alone. "Stay tonight, please." His own voice answering gently. "I will always stay." The memory shattered into darkness again, leaving pain behind. Calder stepped backward, shaking his head. No, this could not be real. Memories did not disappear unless something terrible forced them away. His gaze fell to the wall beside the bed. Faint lines marked the paint, thin scratches arranged in rows. He moved closer. They were not random. They were tally marks. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Counting days. Or nights. Or something worse. Calder felt cold spread through his arms. Someone had been here a very long time. Waiting. A sound rose behind him near the doorway. Not loud. Just movement of air. He turned slowly. At first he saw nothing. Only shadow layered in the corner of the room. Then the darkness shifted slightly. Enough to form the outline of a person standing still. Not clear. Not solid. But present. Calder could not move. Could not breathe. The shape felt familiar even without a face. Like recognizing someone in a dream before seeing them clearly. "Why did you leave?" the voice asked softly. The question carried no anger. Only sadness, so deep it felt endless. Calder's knees weakened. Because somewhere inside, he knew there had been a reason. Something terrible. Something final. "I don't remember," he whispered. "I swear I don't." The shadow remained motionless. Yet the room filled with emotion. Loss. Loneliness. Years of silence pressing inward. Another fragment of memory broke through suddenly. Flashing red lights outside the building. Voices shouting. A door forced open. Someone lying on the floor too still. Calder gasped and grabbed the edge of the dresser. The image vanished before showing the face. But one truth remained clear. Something had happened in this room. Something no one survived the same way. Tears blurred his vision again. "Tell me what happened," he begged. "Please." For a long moment nothing answered. Then the music box slowed, each note stretching farther apart. The shadow near the doorway moved slightly closer. Not walking, just appearing nearer. "You promised you would come back," the voice said. "But you never did." Pain filled every word. Not accusing, just broken. Calder shook his head desperately. "I tried to come back. I just don't know why I didn't." Silence wrapped around them both. Then another memory surfaced, clearer than the others. Sharp as glass. A hospital corridor. White lights. A doctor speaking quietly. Head injury. Memory loss. "You were lucky to survive." Calder's breath stopped. Survive. That meant someone else had not. His eyes lifted slowly toward the shadow. And in that moment, understanding began to form. Slow. Terrible. Unavoidable. If he had survived, then the person who waited had not. The music box gave a final weak note, then stopped completely. Silence flooded the room. The shadow stood only a few steps away now, almost close enough to touch. Calder felt the truth rising fully at last. A name pushing toward his lips. A memory seconds from breaking free. Because he was not just someone who forgot. He was someone who left. And whatever happened 8 years ago inside this room was about to be remembered. The silence after the music stopped felt heavier than any sound. Like the room itself was waiting for something to finally be spoken. Calder could hear his own heartbeat. Slow. Uneven. Afraid of what memory might reveal next. The shadow remained only a few steps away. No face. No clear form. Yet filled with presence stronger than anything he had known in years. A name trembled at the edge of his mind. So close it almost hurt. He tried to speak, but his voice failed at first, as if the truth carried too much weight to move through air. The room felt smaller, the past pressing inward from every wall. Another memory opened without warning. Night rain against the windows. The same bedroom, but alive with warm light and quiet breathing. Someone sitting on the edge of the bed, hands twisting together in fear, eyes searching his face for reassurance. You won't leave me alone tonight. Promise. His younger voice answering without hesitation. I promise. The memory shifted suddenly. Voices louder now. Tension rising. An argument he could not fully hear. Words spoken too fast. Fear turning into something sharp. Then a sound. A fall. Silence. Calder's body shook as the image shattered. Because this time one detail remained clear. Blood on the floor beside the bed. A broken breath escaped him. Half sob. Half disbelief. No, he whispered. No. The shadow did not move. Yet sorrow filled the space between them. Tell me the truth, Calder said. His voice thin. Breaking. I need to know. For a long moment nothing answered. Only the faint sound of wind outside the sealed windows. Then the voice came again. Closer than before. Soft but certain. You didn't mean to. The words struck deeper than blame. Because they carried forgiveness. And forgiveness meant something terrible had truly happened. Calder covered his face with shaking hands. Fragments of memory colliding inside him. The argument. The fear. The fall. I tried to help you, he said through tears. I tried. Another piece returned. Clearer. Crueler. Calling for an ambulance. Sirens growing louder. Hands covered in blood that would not stop. A voice beside him fading. Stay? Please stay. His own voice crying back. I'm here. I'm here. Then darkness. Hospital lights. Machines. Doctors speaking in careful, quiet tones. You survived. But there may be memory loss. Calder's knees weakened. He understood now. He had lived. And the one who waited had not. The name finally broke free from the silence of 8 lost years. Leora. The moment he spoke it, the shadow changed. Not brighter. Not clearer. But closer to human shape. As if being remembered gave it strength. Tears streamed down Calder's face without stopping. I'm sorry, he said. Over and over. I'm so sorry. The air around him trembled softly. Not with anger, but with grief finally allowed to breathe. I waited, Leora's voice whispered. I thought if I stayed, you would come back. Each word carried 8 years of loneliness. 8 years of unanswered promise. Calder felt the truth cut deeper than any punishment. After the hospital, after the doctors, he had never returned. Not because he chose to forget, but because forgetting was easier than facing what he believed he caused. So he ran, without knowing he was running. And she waited, without knowing she was gone. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid to remember. Afraid it was my fault. Silence answered gently. Then, it wasn't your fault. The words landed softly. Yet they broke something open inside him. Because he had carried blame without memory. Punishment without truth. The argument had been fear. The fall had been accident. The loss had been tragedy. Not intention. But pain does not measure intention. Only absence. Calder lowered his hands slowly, looking toward the shadow that was both there and not there. Why now, he asked. Why did you call me back? The room felt warmer for the first time. Like something frozen was beginning to thaw. Because you remembered, the voice said. And remembering opens the door. Calder's breath trembled. A strange understanding forming. She had not been trapped by the room. She had been held by the promise. Waiting for the moment he returned. Waiting for the moment he remembered. Waiting for the moment goodbye could finally exist. Tears fell quietly. Not wild. Not desperate. Just honest. I came back, he whispered. I'm here now. The shadow moved closer, stopping only an arm's length away. Though he could not see her face, he felt the shape of her presence, familiar as sunlight from another life. For a moment neither of them spoke, because some silences heal more than words. Then softly, you can let me go now. Calder's chest tightened. A different pain this time. The pain of release. If he let her go, the waiting would end. But so would the last piece of her still near him. I don't want to lose you again, he said. You won't, the voice answered. Not if you remember. The truth settled gently inside him. Love does not stay in rooms. It stays in memory, in change, in the courage to keep living. The music box on the dresser gave one final quiet click. Though no hand touched it, Calder understood. This was the moment. the edge between holding on and setting free. His voice shook, but did not break. "Goodbye, Leora. Thank you for waiting." The air grew very still, peaceful in a way the room had never felt before. The shadow softened, edges fading like mist in early morning. "Goodbye, Calder." The whisper held no sadness now, only warmth, only rest. Light seemed to move through the darkness, not visible, but felt, and slowly, gently, the presence that had waited 8 silent years was gone. The room remained. Dust, furniture, quiet air, but the weight had lifted, like a breath finally released. Calder stood alone beside the silent music box, tears still on his face. Yet something inside him felt lighter than it had in years. Not healed completely, but open to healing. For the first time since the night of rain and sirens, he remembered everything, and remembering no longer felt like punishment. It felt like truth. Morning arrived slowly, not with sudden light, but with a quiet, soft gray that touched the edges of the room like careful hands. Calder had not noticed when he sat down on the floor beside the dresser. Only that time had passed, and the air felt different now. Still, but no longer heavy. The music box remained open, silent, its small metal key no longer turning. Dust floated through a thin beam of early light slipping between the curtains. For the first time in 8 years, nothing in the room felt like it was waiting. Calder breathed in deeply. The air carried the same old scent of wood and fabric and forgotten years. Yet something inside him had changed. The tightness in his chest, the quiet pressure he had carried without understanding. It had loosened, not gone completely. Grief does not disappear in a single night, but it had shifted from weight to memory. He stayed there a long time, sitting beside the silent music box, letting the truth settle gently instead of fighting it. Because fighting had taken 8 years, and peace had taken only one goodbye. When he finally stood, his legs felt weak but steady, like someone learning to walk after believing they never would again. He looked around the bedroom once more. The bed, the curtains, the faint tally marks on the wall. They no longer felt frightening. They felt human. Proof that someone had loved enough to wait. Proof that love had remained even after breath had not. Calder stepped into the narrow hallway, then into the living room. Morning light reached farther here, touching the covered furniture, softening the shadows that had once felt endless. Each step toward the front door felt strange. Not because he feared leaving, but because leaving meant the waiting was truly over. His hand rested on the doorknob. He paused, not from hesitation, but from respect. "Thank you," he whispered softly into the quiet apartment, not asking for an answer, not expecting one, just offering the words that had been missing for years. Then he opened the door and stepped back into the hallway. The building looked the same. Faded paint, dim lights, dust along the floor edges. Ordinary, yet the hallway no longer felt like a place frozen in time. It felt like somewhere people could pass through, somewhere life could continue. Calder turned and gently closed the door to Unit 3A. The latch clicked with a simple final sound. Not a prison closing, not a secret hiding, just a room at rest. He stood there for a moment, waiting to feel the shadow, waiting to hear a knock. Nothing came, only quiet, warm, peaceful, and in that quiet, he understood. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only healed. Days began to move again after that morning. Small days, simple days. Calder returned to work, driving the same aging van along the same highways, stopping at the same hospitals and schools and empty late-night buildings. But something inside the routine had changed. The silence no longer felt like hiding. It felt like space. He began noticing things he had ignored for years. Sunrise reflecting off glass doors. Voices of nurses laughing softly at 2 in the morning. The smell of fresh coffee in places that never truly slept. Life had been there the whole time, waiting for him to return the way she had waited. One evening a week later, he stopped at a small roadside diner just outside town, somewhere he had passed hundreds of times without entering. The sign buzzed softly in the fading light. Inside, warm yellow lamps glowed against clean windows. He almost kept driving. Old habits do not disappear easily, but instead he parked the van, sat still for a moment, then stepped out. The The bell above the diner door rang gently as he entered. A simple, ordinary sound, yet it felt important, like the beginning of something small and real. He chose a seat by the window, hands resting quietly on the table, not knowing what to do next. A server approached with a calm, tired smile, the kind given at the end of long days. "Coffee?" she asked softly. Calder nodded. When the cup arrived, steam rising slowly into the air, he wrapped his hands around the warmth. For a long moment, he simply sat there, breathing, watching cars pass outside, listening to quiet conversation from distant booths. Nothing dramatic, nothing magical, just life continuing. And for the first time in years, he did not feel separate from it. He felt present. A memory surfaced then, not painful, not sharp. Leora laughing in warm sunlight outside the apartment, holding a paper cup of coffee too hot to drink, smiling at him like ordinary moments mattered. The memory stayed, clear, gentle. It did not vanish. Calder closed his eyes briefly, letting the feeling move through him without fear. When he opened them, tears rested there, but they were soft tears, not breaking, not drowning, just remembering. Weeks passed. Winter slowly loosened its hold on the town, snow melting into thin rivers along the streets, cold air softening toward spring. One afternoon, Calder stood in the hallway outside Unit 3A again, not because of fear, not because of mystery, just because he wanted to. The door looked the same as always, quiet, closed, still, but it no longer felt lonely. He placed a small object on the floor beside it. The music box, carefully repaired, cleaned, silent, not as a sign of waiting, but as a sign of memory. Then he turned and walked back to his own apartment, not looking over his shoulder, because he did not need to anymore. Time continued moving forward the way it always does. Slowly, without asking permission, Calder began opening his curtains during the day, letting sunlight reach places that had stayed dark. He started answering calls from unknown numbers, speaking more than a few words at a time, learning again how conversation feels. Small changes, almost invisible, yet each one proof that life had not ended 8 years ago, only paused. One evening, near the start of spring, he stood outside the apartment building, watching the sky turn gold behind distant rooftops. Cars moved along the highway. Birds crossed the fading light. Someone laughed somewhere he could not see. Ordinary sounds, beautiful in their simplicity. Calder breathed in slowly, feeling the air fill his lungs without resistance. Grief was still there. It always would be. But it no longer trapped him in the past. It walked beside him, quiet, honest, human. And beside that grief, something new had begun to grow. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. But possibility. He looked once toward the third-floor window of Unit 3A. Curtains still, glass reflecting the evening sky. No shadow waited there. Only light fading gently into night. Calder nodded once. A small private gesture. Then he turned toward the street, toward the sound of distant life continuing, toward days he had not yet lived. And he walked forward. Not quickly, not perfectly, but willingly. Because sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is keep living after goodbye. The hallway remained behind him, quiet, at peace, and somewhere beyond memory and time. No one was waiting alone anymore. The forgotten room was no longer a place of loss. It had become something softer, a place where love stayed, even after the door finally closed.